Hi, Assalamualaikum everyone. So today we're back again and we are going to talk about vertebrates. So basically, I am going through a very general characteristic of vertebrates. I would mostly be talking about the evolution and how they are related to each other, right? Okay, so let's have a look. This might seem a little bit complicated to you, but bear with me. I am going to explain to all of you to make it much more easier. So basically, the phylum Chordata or chordates evolve a unique body plan from their very close cousin, which is the echinoderm. So echinoderm sort of have the same kind of tissues with chordates, but they don't have that five more characteristic, which is notochord, tail, dorsal nerve cord, and pharynx. So these are absent in the echinoderms, but they are present in what we call the chordates. So if you look at the phylum Chordata, they typically include three subphyla, which is the Cephalochordata. So Cephalochordata, this is the Cephalochordata. You can see here, this is um, one sub phylum, which is represented by lancelet. So what does it mean here is that this lancelet, they don't have a true bone, but they started to develop the notochord, which where our bone will develop later. They have tail, they have dorsal nerve cords, and they also have pharynx. So this is where the last common ancestor is, and cephalochordates such as lancelet, which you can still find in our modern ocean, is among the earliest ancestor of chordates that has been around since the Cambrian. Right, so this is Cephalochordata. So the next subphyla is the subphyla Tunicata. So tunicates, all right. So tunicates here, if you see sea squirts, they look like sponges, but their larvae have all these five characteristics that the normal chordates will have. So basically, they are still in the phylum Chordata because their larvae have some sort of all the characteristic like other chordates. But although if you look at the adult version of this sea squirt, they don't look anything like vertebrates. They might look like invertebrate, more like invertebrate to me. All right, then we have the phylum Vertebrata. All right, so Vertebrata means instead of having just notochord, the phylum has started to develop the bony skeletons, for example. So these are all the common ancestor before we finally enter the phylum of Chordata. So here you might see a lot of fish, but please understand that all chordates, anything that has vertebrate belongs to the phylum of Chordata, and they mostly belong to the phylum of Vertebrata. This includes tiger, lions, mouse, whatever you name it. These are all the animals that have vertebrates and they belong to the phylum Chordata. So basically, this is where the evolution is. From the notochord, somehow some of the species has developed a pair of sense organ. So you can see here conodons, pair organs is here, sorry. So this is stem vertebrates, and then after they have that, their sensing organs like eyes, they started to have a brain case where they can place the brain. So this is where the bone or bony structure is, the brain case, and you can started to see conodons here. This is the picture of conodons, one of the most significant important fossils records in our rocks to tell basically biostratigraphy. So you can see, although they don't have all the vertebrates yet, but they started to have these hard parts inside them, brain cases that place important sense organs. And you can see these are the cases. It looks like jaws, but basically it's just a brain cases. And then these conodons somehow give rise to the earliest fish-like, or I would say more to the modern fish-like animal, which is the ostracoderm. So these are the ostracoderm. They might look very, very bony to you. They might look like they have a heavy armor, but they are jawless. So these are jawless fishes. Um, they don't have that bony skeleton yet. They don't have the true jaws yet. Basically, the armor that cover them, or the plate that cover them, is the one that give them the structure. So then somehow ostracoderms has developed or evolved into placoderms. Basically, here we started to see jaws and bony skeleton in most of the fishes. Um, Although the type of the skeleton, some of them are not, true calcium carbonate. They might have a mix of other chemical element, such as the shark and rays, but basically these are the groups that started to have the jaws and bony skeleton. So this is how recorded is. So you can see here, well, how they develop, part of them from the ancestor, and how they have become more like the modern ocean fish. And here is one of the member of the most primitive group of jawfish. So this fish started to have jaw, and they can become a greater predator during their time because of the jaw. So here's how the evolution of the fishes is. So you can see jawless fishes, like I've talked about lancelet before, has been there since the Cambrian era. But then, Cambrian period. But then we only started to see the diversity of the fishes started to rapidly evolve during Ordovician to Devonian. So if you look at this timeline here, by the time of Devonian, all major groups that you see living today, all the fishes has come into existence. And these three major group here, the orange color, which is the ostracoderm, those are jawless fishes with heavy armor plate, do not survive beyond Carboniferous. You still get placoderms, which is heavily armored and jawfish, that survive probably early Carboniferous, but give rise to other cartilaginous fish. So cartilaginous fish, they are cartilage. They are not the strong bone, as I mentioned before. You can see here sharks and ray. They have cartilaginous skeleton. This is why they are rarely being preserved, because they don't have the hard structure of skeleton like all the rest of the vertebrate is. So from this line of evolution, we started to see the typical ray fin fish started to take over by Triassic, and they are very, very, very much common during our time and during the Cenozoic. And we also started to see the lobe fin fish, which have developed the lungs, slowly developed, lungs like coelacanths here, lungfishes. These Rhyphidistian do not survive beyond Triassic. This is one of the lobe fin fish. You can see they develop a lobe structure in their fin, hence called the lobe fin fish. These animals which give rise to more amphibian. They are the one that give rise to amphibian, and they started to develop the ability to live by the shorelines because they can breathe the air besides those in the water. So remember the lobe-fin fish, and this is another creature that has rise from that lobe-fin fish groups. This is Tiktaalik, a late Devonian creature that was an intermediate between the lobe-fin fish and the amphibians. So basically, this creature has a flat-like crocodile skull with, they have eyes, they have nostrils on the upper face instead of on the each side like fishes. So its fins were intermediate between lobe fin fish. You can see here the orange color, blue and green. So this is how it has developed. The Tiktaalik basically developed a larger structure of this bony skeleton, which will later develop into another structure of the early amphibian. And this structure, or the structure of the bone of Tiktaalik alone, with shoulder joints and finger-like bones, would have allowed the Tiktaalik to prop up on land and probably move itself on land. So this is an evolution between the fishes and the early amphibian. And now let us have a look at the chordates during the early Carboniferous to Permian time. So these are when you see a lot of amphibian. So basically, it can be difficult to distinguish between aquatic and terrestrial vertebrates of late Paleozoic time, because many four-legged animals live along the shore, along the lakes, rivers or shallow seas, and even in the swamps. And well, scientists are, confused whether they are either um, truly terrestrials or they prefer water and things like that. So during this time, most of them still lay eggs in the water or close to the water, like frogs. Um, this is why they live closer to the shore. And the adaptation of having eggs inside a shells without having water surrounding it later will allow this animal to live further inland and less dependent on water. So the only vertebrates to dominate the early Carboniferous landscape were mostly amphibians, which many retain aquatic or semi-aquatic habitats throughout their life. So the species that were fully terrestrials during Carboniferous to Permians are usually adults of these animals, and usually if you find adults with more covered with protective scales, which this means they are more adapted to terrestrial compared to the water body. So the only things that differ them is that they have lots of scales, so they can live further inland where you don't have to worry about drying out. Alright, so by early Permian, we see a lot of changes. So just now in Carboniferous, there's a lot of amphibians. So by early Permian, it's time for Pelycosaurus to dominate. So Pelycosaurus is a fin-backed reptiles, and these are the animals that become top carnivores and widespread in the ecosystem during the early Permian. So what is so special about Pelycosaurus is that they had a skull structure that in some ways resemble the mammal skull structures. And their descendant, which is the Pelycosaurs, the descendants of the Pelycosaurs, which is the Therapsids, appear in the late Permian time and finally took over or dominate the late Permian environment. So let's talk more about Therapsid. So Therapsid is, has many characteristics that is almost similar to mammals. So number one, their legs were positioned more vertically beneath their body. So in the earlier reptile or amphibian, the legs were wide spread, like the crocodile, for example. But in therapsid, they are, more vertically positioned. The leg is vertically positioned beneath the body. They have a jaw that is much more complex and powerful, like mammals. Many experts believe that therapsids were actually endothermic, which means they are warm-blooded, which means they can regulate their own temperature. So this feature is actually different from their ancestor, which is the Pelycosaurus, because the Pelycosaurus is ectothermic, which is cold-blooded animal. So due to the high metabolic rates in the therapsid, for them to maintain their body temperature is very, very crucial, and this allowed them to move around in their surroundings. And scientists also, as if you look closely at this picture over here, if you look closely at this picture over here, paleontologists has also found the presence of hair on therapsid, which is similar to that of you can find in the modern mammals. And paleontologists think that this hair may help insulate the body temperatures of the therapsid. Next, let's talk about the dinosaurs. So, by after the end of the Permian, we understand that there's a lot of animals that went extinct due to the mass extinction or the great dying. So, it was quite a slow rise or recovery during the early Triassic, but some creatures somehow appear to have better adaptation, and these creatures is the one that dominate the middle Mesozoic up to the upper Mesozoic or end of Mesozoic. So the dinosaurs, which is quite familiar with the Mesozoic era, is a group or members of Dinosauromorpha. So you can see it's a group of Dinosauromorpha. So the dinosaur actually inherited their advanced locomotory ability or the ability to move from the early dinosauromorph. So you can see here, this is the dinosauromorph, and there's a link actually between this and the dinosauria. So dinosaur is actually a descendant from the dinosauromorpha, and they have their own group which is called the dinosauria. So inside here you have other different groups. So let me talk about the dinosaur more. So early dinosauromorph, well, in their ancestor, the early dinosauromorph probably spend much of their time standing or walking on all four. Alright, so they are mostly, still relying on all four to move around, but some may have evolved and have the ability to stand on two legs. And this adaptation is similar to the ostriches, as we see right now. And this is where the last common ancestor is, and you get to see how dinosauria evolved. Alright, so many dinosaurs did not become very gigantic until the Jurassic time, but few dinosaur taxa, like this taxa, which is the Melanorosaurus, get their body quite large during the Triassic. So as we understand that Triassic is still a recovery time, but this particular animal has been able to grow quite big during the Triassic. The rest of the dinosaur grew larger during Jurassic time. So dinosaur actually can fall into two groups, which are characterized by the different pelvic structure. So the pelvic structure here is the one that tells them apart. You can see this pelvic structure here and here is different. So let us have a look. So all the bird hip, all right, so this is all the bird hip, or what we call ornithischian dinosaurs, were mostly herbivore, but this group, which is the lizard hip or saurischians group, includes some herbivores and carnivorous dinosaurs. That means saurischians group may have a species that feeds on just the vegetables. Some may feed on meat, but here on the ornithischian group, they are mostly herbivore. So the largest dinosaur of them all were the sauropods. So this is the sauropodomorpha. They are lizard hip, as you can see. They are under Saurischian. They are lizard hip herbivores that move on all fours. So these are all the different types of sauropods you can see. So during the Jurassic, several sauropod genera has grew very large, and they can grow up to more than 30 meters in length. And you can see they are quite huge compared to us human here as you know uh, a scale for you to understand. Alright, so what happened is after the dinosaur took over the Triassic and Jurassic, we started to see also in late Triassic some vertebrates that try to invade the air. So right now we understand there's a lot of animals in the marine environment, and there's a lot of animal on the land as well, which is dominated by the dinosaurs or the dinosauria. And by late Triassic period, some vertebrate has started to invade the air, and this is the pterosaurus. I think that is how we mention it, pterosaurs. So pterosaurs, like this picture here, had a long wings and their bones is quite hollow. So scientists think that this is to facilitate them to fly around. So fossils here belong to the pterodactylus. So the pterosaurs is a group of dinosaur, and this species is actually Pterodactylus, preserved in the Upper Jurassic of in limestone in Germany. So this is Upper Jurassic. So by Upper Jurassic, you see a lot of flying dinosaurs, I would say. The structure of the pterosaur skeletons reveal that they are able to fly, but the great length of their wings suggests that many species do not really flap their wings to fly, but instead they take off, and once they are airborne, they can soar on, using air currents to facilitate them uh, in the air. So basically, they don't flap and fly, but they take off, and that wing help them to soar in the air. So that is what paleontologists think of pterosaurs here. So what happens is that here you can't see any structure. You just have to guess whether they have feather or they don't. Probably they look like a flying squirrels, where they take off and fly, or bats, where they don't have feathers, things like that. But fortunately for us, we started to see a lot more fossils, and another fossil which is also found in Germany suggested that the ancestor of birds has existed during the early Mesozoic. So this is another ancestor of birds. So the early Mesozoic, the fossils of this feathered animal, which is named the Archaeopteryx, which mean the ancient wing, has been discovered in Germany. So these fossils over here, uh, the Archaeopteryx itself has a skeleton that looks like dinosaur. However, they have feathers. So this is one of the feathered fossils. And this feather is what paleontologists think help them for gliding and flying. So Now we know that by early Mesozoic, we don't just see terrestrial animals. Some animals like pterosaurs and the Archaeopteryx started to evolve and take over the air, and they have the ability to fly in the air. Alright, so right now we've learned about amphibian, we've learned about reptiles, we even talk about birds, but how about mammals? So throughout the Mesozoic era, mammals has evolved quite a few new traits. So the oldest known mammals are found from the late Triassic age. The bones that form the joint between the jaw and the skull of mammal has somehow create their identity. This is the difference between the rest of the group. So they differ from the bones that are from the reptiles. So these bones are the one that define mammals. So fossil skulls reveals that the earliest mammals had brain that were very large for their body size, and the extensive regions of the brains were very associated with hearing and smell. So that means they have larger brain, and that large part of the brains are used for hearing and smell. And although mammals remain very small and relatively, I would say, unfamous until the end of Cretaceous, they did diversify a lot during the Mesozoic, and we can see that the first herbivorous forms of mammals, which evolved during the Jurassic periods, have teeth like those of modern rodents. And this is one of the picture of modern, not sorry, a rodent-like mammals from the Cretaceous, and by late Cretaceous time, there were also mammals known as marsupials, and this group of mammals carry their young in their pouches, just like kangaroo, and they are quite dominant during the Cretaceous period. And not until later, during after the Cretaceous and after the mass extinction, we started to see a rise of the mammals. Most mammals will belong to the placental groups, which a group that explain about animals that have their young and placenta. So this group eventually evolve and do better after the Cretaceous, especially during the Cenozoic. So that is it on vertebrate, I guess. There are more to learn. If you are interested, you can always refer to most of the books that talk about vertebrates. But these are all the basics information on the vertebrates that you need to know, and I hope this could be great use to you, especially if you are looking forward to do some of them for your final year project. All right, so with that, thank you everyone.